and a permanent place on the moon.
And some news tonight from NASA, going public with a bold plan to return to the moon and eventually have astronauts stay there for 6 months at a stretch. NASA plans to set up a lunar polar base camp, with the first crew landing in the year 2020 and the permanent outpost finished 4 years later. No word on what the price tag might be.
Finally tonight, putting man back on the moon permanently.
NASA's plans to return to the moon came into much sharper focus yesterday with the announcement it will build a small base at the moon's south pole by 2024. For more about this plan, we turn to Keith Cowling. Keith, welcome, and remind us again, why is it that we want to go back to the moon?
Well, what you saw today, Gwen, was sort of like you said, bringing things into sharper focus from a speech that President Bush made back in January 2004. Where
we will undertake extended human missions to the moon as early as 2015, with the goal of living and working there for increasingly extended periods of time. Returning to the moon is an important step for our space program, establishing an extended human presence on the moon.
He simply said we're going back to the moon to learn how to live there and then to learn how to go on to explore other planets. But we also want to explore the moon as a scientific object in its own right. So what you saw today was further sharpening of these goals and objectives so as to take the president's vision, as they call it, and put it into hardware.
Okay, let's talk about putting the vision into reality here. So what are the technical requirements that they're talking about in order to go to the moon? They're setting up a lunar camp, essentially, where they're allowed to stay longer than they have in previous up and back visits.
And setting up a permanent base.
Now let's talk money. Is there a national appetite for what it will cost? I read somewhere today $125 billion to get the first landing by 2018.
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Last year when the initial version of this was brought out, the very first question from somebody from NPR was 104 million, 130. It could be higher. Nobody quite knows.
Well, how and then do you convince the American public or other nations who will you be asking to join with, as the government would be asking to join, that this is worth doing for its own sake? That is, exploring for the sake of exploration versus exploring because it's going to bring back scientific knowledge that will help people on Earth.
The traditional response is, great nations explore, and it's something that, throughout history great nations have done. Well, that may be true, but this is the 21st century. It's the Internet age. You need answers like the moment after you ask the question, and you really need to provide the rationale for doing this. And to a certain extent, people are wondering, can we trust NASA with all the other programs that have run over in terms of cost and schedule? In terms of it being an endeavor that the American people and possibly other nations are going to be asked to spend billions of dollars, I do think NASA, and they're working on this, but I do think NASA has to come up with some crisper answers, ones that just don't reach to one part of the populace, but to young people as well as your Joe Sixpack, to people who are retired and wondering who's going to be paying their medical bills. I think NASA really needs to focus on that why, not the how.
And before that happens, 2010 is when the space shuttle is supposed to be retired. How do astronauts going to get to the moon if the space shuttle is retired?
Well, one of the things about the vision for space exploration, one of the very first things that President Bush said is that we're going to retire the space shuttle, and he set a goal of 2010, and NASA's working very diligently to do that. But They need to replace it with something which is kind of like Back to the Future. It looks like Apollo, and that's not a mistake. It's meant to be designed to carry people from initially Earth to the International Space Station, but eventually to the Moon. And the question is, when we retire the shuttle in 2010, there will be a gap of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 years possibly. And can America really sit here and not have its own access to the space station for that period of time? We found it problematical after the Columbia accident, and there's a lot of people in Congress that think that perhaps that gap should be shortened. And, of course, that means more money, which is back to one of your earlier questions.
Wow.
Still, the space station is now years behind schedule and tens of millions of dollars over budget. And critics charge the scientific returns won't justify the costs.
It clearly took too long and cost too much money and has turned out to be a diversion to NASA's long-range and the United States long-range interests in completing the whole vision for space exploration.
But the man who runs NASA says to the contrary. The space station is critical to NASA's long-term vision.
When you bring it all together, the space station, the moon, looking forward past that to Mars, these are the steps that we have to take if we want to become a spacefaring nation.
NASA has just 4 years to finish the space station and retire the shuttle fleet before shifting its attention back to the moon and the rockets to get there.
Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars.
That's right. Back to the moon. NASA's next big project is to establish a 4-person outpost on the moon. Within 20 years, moon colonists will harness solar power to sustain the station. Price tag, $230 billion for our national mooning. Question, is it in our national interest to have moonlings in a permanent base on the moon? What?
You know, for $230 billion, I would say no. You can't separate it from the cost. We've got so many other needs that are, in my judgment, ahead of that I wouldn't do.
If you look at the degradation of this planet and you think long term, I think we are going to have to start investigating other places to live in the universe.
It's money well spent, but there are a lot of people who believe we should go directly to Mars, and a lot of advocates that we should spend a little more.
Oh, my God.
No. There are serious folks who believe that Mars is a place we should...
The only way we can pay for this is through tax cuts, apparently, so I don't think it's a starter. Maybe we'll send 30,000 troops there for now.
Officials have unveiled a plan to build an elaborate permanent base on the moon. But are Americans ready for the trip?
NASA's new plan calls for something far more dramatic. It all starts by 2020, just 13 years from now.
It could turn out to be that we are on the moon for not just a decade or so, but we could be on the moon for a few hundred years.
So why send humans back to the moon when robots could do much of the exploring for us? Because, says NASA, sustaining humans 200,000 miles from the Earth is simply in our DNA. So why send humans back to the moon when robots could do much of the exploring for us? Because, says NASA, sustaining humans 200,000 miles from the Earth is simply in our DNA.
The space program is about American presence on the frontier of our time, and I think that is crucial.
The ultimate challenge and the new frontier.